You're listening to the Coach's Journey podcast, exposing the struggles and celebrating the successes in the life of coaches who are action takers and creating authentic impact in today's world. Whether you're just starting out, expanding your reach, or exploding your impact, you're in the right place right now. Stay tuned and be sure to subscribe to this podcast. Now, here are your hosts of the Coach's Journey podcast.
What's up, Coaches Nation? This is Dr. Sheri with another episode of the Coach's Journey podcast with our amazing co-host Faisal and Ensaun. And we'll pretend that there's a bunch of people cheering right now. We have a really awesome episode planned for today. It is all about sleazy sales and rather how to not do that. Now, I would say I don't even know a coach that would raise their hand and say, yes, my sales process has some sleaze in it, sprinkled with sleaze. But here's the thing, it actually might be coming across that way without you intending or wanting it to be that way. So we're just going to unpack some of the things that we've seen, what we've heard, some of the conversations we've had with other coaches to help you think through your sales process in a much more intentional and in-depth way so that you can make sure that you're giving off the vibe that you're actually intending.
Yeah. One of the most important things to understand in this whole process as we go through this, we're actually talking about a human process. We sometimes forget that sales is an expression of the human experience, and when it goes out into the world, it becomes about business, and we notice the negative aspects of it, where it's sleaziness, ickiness. It kind of gets, in my view, as I've looked at it, I've tried to understand it from a human perspective, which is why I actually love that book behind me, To Sell as Human. It actually helped me connect quite a few of the dots by Daniel Pink. But when you're looking at it from that perspective, how can we approach it in a way that actually sales, ultimately it's about building relationships. And within that trusting relationships, you're making an offer that's valuable it's an exchange offer that's valuable to both sides. And of course, the client sees the value and the exchanges that they're giving you, the money for the value that they're receiving. But that only works within the context of a trusting relationship. You can scale that and amplify that with bigger brands. What are bigger brands doing? They're building trust and relationship with you. Their brand name matters. And it was like Gary Vee who talked about it. It's like, when he was talking about the transition from sales to marketing, he's like, you don't need to have sales calls with Nike because they've already built that relationship. All you need to show is that tick mark that everybody's aware is that's the symbol of that relationship that you have with Nike.
Yeah.
And people, that sells.
So something interesting, just an aside, but related to that little check mark, Alex Hermosi, who if you're not following him or listening to some of his content on podcasts and that sort of thing, I do think you're missing out because he has such super powerful things to say about sales process and how to do it well and how to do it in a way that actually is long-term focused. But he said something on a podcast the other day about AI. Now, we are going to be talking about AI in our coaching mastery group here this week. Of course, when this podcast launch, it will be in the past. But AI is a super powerful thing, and it has a place in the coaching world. What place is it? I don't know. We're going to have a conversation about that. But what he predicted is that little check mark next to your profile is what is going to become even more important, because that's how people are going to know that it's an actual person versus, an AI generated account or that sort of thing. So some interesting things, just, kind of coming down, kind of predicting in the future about genuine relationship, about building trust, and about being, really entrenched in that human experience.
Yeah. And I want to, for me, and I understand what coaches go through, because a lot of coaches that come in, they don't primarily come for the sake of business. They come with this thought process, and I had the same thought process. How can I add value? How can I create a bigger impact? They're wanting to serve people, support people. So business is never the forefront. Now, the problem is that that's the medium that they're using that they know very little about. And by they, I mean, like I started out like a not understanding like I thought I understood what business was, but it made no sense to me as I started out in the process. And I was doing the complete opposite of what I should have been doing from the beginning. But the cool thing was that at least as coaches, there are certain strengths that you have as a coach that you can leverage in business. And one of those strengths is understanding other human beings, understanding other people's psychology, understanding how you process things, understanding your experience in a deeper way. That all that stuff, those are strengths in your business. And if you can bring that forward, you can do amazing things in your business. But the key is understanding that the medium that you're using is business. And business runs within the context of there's an exchange value with money. So money is a key piece, business is a key piece. And if you have blocks around that, challenges around that, you need to deal with that, because you will not be able to build a business without that. That's as a primary thing. And then I want to spend a little bit of time talking about, well, how do different organizations and people or coaches approach sales, and what are the things that work, what are things that don't work, what are the things that feel more aligned with us? Because there are things that could work, but it might not feel aligned with your values as a human being, as somebody who wants to build a certain kind of business. And that's an important piece, because though if you're kind of if your business is and I'll share a couple of stories around that, if your business is making you move away from your principles and values, that is not a sustainable business, because you're going to break it down later on yourself. But if it's aligned with your values, it's much more sustainable. You're going to enjoy it. You're going to do it because this is just a part of your life. Before I go into some of those perspectives and stories, Sheri, what are your thoughts about?
So one of the things that I have come to pay attention to is how people sell me. Yeah. And so I really just want to talk about this and have our conversation about this, because I know this is where Faisal's going. But as you're listening to this as a coach, how have you experienced yourself being sold to in the past, or even currently? Like, think of the last time. For me, I mean, there have been a few things that I have bought into. There's a larger kind of mastermind community that I bought into recently. There is a tax strategist company that I bought into recently. I'm just thinking of all the things. And I think, what does their sales process look like? And have you ever had a sales call, been a recipient of one, where you have walked away being like, God, like they were just, I felt badgered. I felt pressured. I felt like I really didn't know what I was getting myself into. Like, whatever your thoughts are, notice them. And then think about how they did things, and then think about how you're doing things in your coaching business. If you had an amazing experience and at the end you were like, oh my gosh, it was obvious that was the choice I needed to do, I feel even better about myself and my life having signed up. And I'm so excited. If that's the experience you had, what did they do right? And how can you implement that in your life, in your strategy around sales and coaching? So just think about that on those two levels. What have you experienced, and how can you do or not do that in your own business?
Yeah. And we're going to kind of explore that with some of the stories that we share. One of the first stories I want to share is actually one of our clients that recently joined us. I had a conversation with her. It was one of my first, second conversation with her. And I was asking, I knew that she was involved in another program. And the first conversation we had a couple of months ago, actually, before that, I knew that she had support. She was part of another business program, and they were supporting her, helping her to move forward. I'm like, oh, great. You have the support. Take advantage of all the resources that we have. Let's check in and see, because she was coming to the end of that program as well, to see if that worked. Are there any areas we can support you with? I got on the call with her to kind of check in, and she basically told me, and I could tell there was a heaviness. She's like, I kind of gave up on that program, and I wanted to know more about what was happening. And one of the first things that she said was that, it didn't feel aligned with me. Like, what do you mean by it didn't feel aligned with you? And who are these people who were helping you? They were business coaches and who were trying to help her. And everything she was saying, there was nothing wrong with the way they were approaching it. It didn't feel aligned with her. They were teaching her some of the marketing stuff. They were teaching her the prospecting, which were really sound principles in business. But the way they were teaching her a specific model and a specific way of doing her sales calls, her marketing, her prospecting, and something in that process was off. And I knew I knew what it was, but I wanted her to say it instead of me to tell her. So I asked her these questions. As I'm like, well, let's put a pause on that. Had you approached it as a coach, based on what you know how coaching world works, what would you have done? And she basically laid out the plan. I'm like, and I told him like, that works better than what they were teaching you, and that's what we teach you. And asked him like, how do you know that? Well, I understand like how are people going to buy the thing that they don't have an experience around? Those business coaches didn't understand the coaching world, for one thing. Second, they were getting her to get on a very short consult call. Don't do any coaching and make sure you make the offer very quickly, without building that relationship, that trust, and the way that needs to be built. And she didn't feel aligned with that. She's like, it feels off. Like, this is not how I want to approach people. I want them to know that I'm serving them. But she didn't know. She had an intuition around it. She had some background information, but she was putting their authority above her own instincts. And I can tell you, as soon as I confirmed that, she was in tears. She's like, I didn't listen to my own instinct around it. And this is the different, at least one different approach. Go ahead, Sheri.
And the challenge with that, I think, for a lot of, specifically a lot of newer coaches, is you have this instinct. You may have this instinct in different areas of your business, but if you're not collaborating with different coaches that can affirm that instinct, you might just be frustrated, but not really know why you're frustrated, or not be able to properly assign that to feeling disconnected with, what somebody is telling you to do, or maybe even a book or whatever, like different pieces. So as a newer coach, you're kind of vulnerable, in my opinion, to having these instinctual checks, but then not really being sure what to do with it, or how to even interpret it in a way that's useful.
Yeah, and because and when I was starting out as a coach, I had no frame of reference. I knew certain things that I knew instinctually, certain things that I picked up in my training as a coach. But from a business standpoint, I had no frame of reference. I don't know if I ran a webinar for a while, whether or not it will work. I don't know if I did these calls in this way, whether it will work or not. And if it was if my current self would go back to that self, I would basically look at what I was doing, and I'd be like, initially I was starting to do these webinars. It took me a lot to even start it. I would have continued that on. Like, for the next 2 years, but like, just get focused and get better at that, deliver in the way that you're doing it, and have these conversations after that. But I gave that up within 2 months. I gave that up because I wasn't. So, and here's the addition to what you said. So not just being in conversation with coaches, but coaches who are actually actively moving their business forward. They're actively trying from business side, because there are a lot of coaches you'll be in contact with from your certification who are kind of practicing coaching, and you're like back and forth, but they're practicing. They're not actually putting themselves out there. They're not trying out different things on the business side. So even if I had a few coaches I was talking to, even if I brought it up, they had just the same view as I did. It's like, I don't know, it might work or it might not work. Just stick to it for a little while. So there was this vague, there's this weird space that I was in where I had the instinct to do something, but there was no confirmation around, should I continue on? Is this going to give me a better ROI or something else? And usually it'd be like, I look at the next shiny thing, be like, no, I think that will work better. And then I'll stick to that for about a month, and then that will work better. And that seems to be a lot of coaches when I talk to them. They're like, they've tried so many different things, nothing has worked, because they don't have a view as to what works in the next, if they stick to it. And they're always questioning that. When there's doubt and you're questioning that, and you hear the next thing that works better for somebody else, you're going to jump into that one.
Yes.
And that's where things break down. So being around other coaches who are actually trying this is probably an important component. So even if you're getting a business coach, you still need a community. And this is why our business coaching is connected to our community. It's not separate.
What are some other stories that you've heard around this topic?
So actually, one of the reasons why we started this topic, we have one of our community members. He joined our program. He shared this, and we're actually going to share that testimonial because we asked him whether we can. Well, we'll just share this, Carlos, because we're going to share the testimonial anyway. So he jumped on a call with me, and I've been in conversation with him for the past. He's been in our free community for the past 2.5 months by now. something like that. And I had a call with him close to 2 months ago, and I just supported him on that call. I think he had a coach at that point who was helping him. It was a little bit helpful. He was part of some other stuff too. And I was like, just taking advantage of all the things that we have. And since then, he has come to a lot of the master classes that we've done, to the sessions that we've done. And he finally decided to join, and asked him, well, what made you want to join? And he said something really powerful. And one of the things that I liked about him is that he did his due diligence. And that's really important, that if you're going to jump into a program, first of all, do the thinking ahead and really look at, are you going to stick to this long term? And he actually did that. He's been watching us. He's been observing. I've been on calls with him. And he's like, to be honest with you, I've been talking to other companies too who are offering similar services as you guys. And I've been in conversation with them. I've been part of their stuff. When he would get on the calls with them, they would make these claims as to, oh, we're gonna help you make $10,000 in 3 months. We're gonna help you make this, and this is our guarantee. But when I would get on calls with you guys, you actually didn't make those kind of claims. They're like, we're gonna take you through this challenge. We're gonna support you. You're gonna do the work, and we're gonna help you get to that point. If you don't, we're gonna continue to help you. And when I would ask you why you're not giving something like that, you clearly told me that there is no one path for every coach. We help you create a custom path moving forward, and we support you moving forward. And you're going to have to do the work. But from the other side, if you just follow my specific way, you're going to make $10,000 in 3 months. And something intuitively he knew as a coach, there are a lot of things that need to build for you to make something like that. It's not just about the sales process. And these guys didn't even understand the coaching world well. So it didn't align with him. And then on top of that, he also noticed that one of the other things, he's like, I was getting so much value from your free community. I couldn't even imagine what I would be getting from your paid program. You guys were constantly delivering value. You were showing up on the call. You were supporting me. And I wasn't even part of your program. And I told him that, I'm like, this is how we approach our own coaching clients. We're all coaches. That's what we're trying to model. And if you are connected to another company who's modeling that icky or sleazy tactics in the coaching world, that might be perfectly fine in another business. But if it doesn't feel aligned with you, more than likely, that's what they're going to teach you. And whatever you see us doing out in the community, that's what we're going to teach you, because that's what we know. And that's what we do with you. And that's what we do with another client as well. And we know this, like in normal conversations, that what you do in one part of your life, you're going to do it in another part too. If you're a crappy person in one part, that's going to come and show up in another part of your life too. So that really touched my heart, because it's actually a very cumbersome process if you really think about it. When you actually do create a sales process that is actually supportive towards people, you're actually trying to help them and finding out what their needs are, and build a process that actually supports them long term. Now, as this client has joined us, and I told him, like, we are in this business not for the next 3 years, 2 years. We're here 10, 20 years out. I see you as one of our leaders. I see you growing with us. That is a very different approach to bringing somebody over than, oh, here's a program that's going to make you $10,000. They can both work, but which one feels aligned with you?
Yeah. And as you're sharing that, Faisal, as our listeners who are coaches, at some point of the journey, you're at the beginning, at the middle, at the scaling. These are the thoughts to then bring to your own process. Like, are you providing an insane amount of value before they ever even pay you? And so this can show up certainly in, are you putting videos out there? Do you have stuff on YouTube or Facebook? And, are you kind of educating or teaching or doing some kind of coaching in that way? That's great. But how about how you approach actually getting people to sign up or giving them that opportunity? When you have your sales call or your strategy session or your discovery session or any of the other 100 names that you might call it, how is that going? Are you actually coaching? Are you actually digging into their stuff? And do you make an offer every time? And if they don't buy, then you put them in the garbage, the name and number in the garbage, and then you move on to the next one. Or do you really, if you feel like you served them well, or maybe not, maybe you struggled with kind of giving the value that you wanted, are you willing to jump on another call in a month or in a couple weeks or in a couple months, and check in with them again. Is there something else you can do to serve them? Like, what does that look like? Because these are some of the decisions that you either are consciously making or you're not consciously making, but you are making. And if you can think through the potential implications on how people are perceiving you, your coaching and your business, that can be a dramatic shift for you in the lifetime of your coaching.
Yeah, definitely. And maybe we can make it more specific around, okay,
Yes.
What is our approach and how do we do this? And this is what we teach. This is essentially what we do in our community as well. The approach is actually fairly simple. And actually the foundations came from the prosperous coach, Rich Lippman and Steve Chandler's process. And the reason why I love this process, because it's simple. I think it was Einstein's quote, or at least it's attributed to Einstein, that says that any smart fool can make something complex, but it actually takes a touch of genius to make something simple, something to that effect. And the reason why I love this process is because it's very simple. It doesn't require complexity. It doesn't require all sorts of funnels and everything else for you to make. You can add complexity to it, but it's a very basic process. And the process is this. You connect with somebody online or in person, get to know them a little bit and understand what their goals are, what are they trying to do, what's their vision for their life, what might be some of their struggles in the process, and figure out, and within that context, pick out a few things that they might be struggling in, they don't know how to approach it. And you just make an offer. And the offer is this: would you like to jump on a longer call so I can support you in this area? And they'll either say yes or a no. If they say yes, you get on a longer call. That call could be a 1 hour call. It could be a 90-minute call. It could be a 2 hour call. Depends on your model. Then we encourage that you test any of those lengths for yourself. I've seen anywhere from 45 minutes to 2 hours, and sometimes even longer than that for some coaches. So you get on a 2 hour call. I do on a 2 hour call, whatever yours is, and you actually try to understand what they're going through in a deeper way, understand their vision, and find out how you can support them in a couple of areas. Demonstrate your process so they go through the experience of seeing how you can help somebody. And at the end of the call, one of two things happens. If you feel confident that you've served, you make your offer for your coaching program. If you don't, you book another call. In fact, actually, one of the things that I've learned that's very profound from one of my business coaches, and they follow the same process. They're like, they have a rule of thumb. They don't offer anything on the first two calls. That's actually hard to, like, the rule of thumb is don't offer any programs with any price tags in the first two calls. And
That's
so they offer it on the third call. And so the way I've looked at it, I gauge it. In my experience, I gauge it. If I feel like it has landed, they've seen that I've supported them, you can usually tell that. And if you haven't gone through our masterclass on delivery, watch that, go through that. And if you don't have the link for that, let us know, we'll share it. I share how you can gauge that. You can gauge that usually at the end of the session, how the session went and what to look for. And at the end of that, you're deciding either you're making the offer or you're booking another call to make the offer. And when you make the offer, you let them know this, how you can support them. This is what your program is. And there's a structure for that too. We can talk about that too. And they'll either say, yes, I'm excited to jump in, as Rich Lippman will say. He's looking for clients who want to say hell yes, or no. It's like, if you're hell yes, move forward. You will get to that point. You might not feel that in the beginning, but you're working towards that. So they'll either say yes, or they might have some challenges in things that they're thinking about, which we call objections in sales. You're helping them work through that stuff. You're dealing with those objections by answering their questions, by helping them think through it in a little bit of a different way. So for example, they might be like, well, I don't know if this is the right thing right now, or if I can be fully committed in terms of my time. How much time would I need to do that? And you're helping them work through that. Okay, well, first of all, helping them reframing that, putting in the time into coaching, even though they're business, that's going to actually help them free up other time in their life, because it's going to help them become more productive. So that's just one objective. And then helping them understand, okay, can you dedicate this much time to this and this much time on the worksheets, or whatever that looks like. But you're dealing with objections, helping them resolve that. And if they say that, you know what, I need to check in with my husband or wife, that could be another objection. It's like, okay, great. Like, help me understand, what are you presenting? You're dealing with that objection too. If they need to go and talk to them, come back. I'm okay with that as long as they're continuing the conversation with me. So my goal is to just book these conversations and consistently build that relationship. Now, the assumption is that before that, even that first call, they've heard of me. They've seen some of my content, or they've seen me on a training, or I've added some kind of value through a lead magnet or through my group or through something. So now I'm taking them through this journey on these calls, and they might sign up at the end. And let's say at the end of the call, let's say from the time that they connected with me to the time that we had that final offer call, it's been, let's say, 2-3 weeks, or maybe it's been 2 months. But they say that, oh, you know what? I decided that I'm not ready yet, but I will be ready then. I'll ask them, like, would you be okay if I check in with you then? Can we book a call for that? I'll do that. I'll continue the conversation forward. And I will even ask them, like, do you think somebody else in your network would benefit from this process that I would take them through? You can even ask them for referrals. But two things happens as you walk people through this process. Not only are you really practicing your coaching skills, because you're working with actual clients, they're going to give you feedback.
Yeah.
Also, you're building a network around you. You're serving people. And when you've worked with enough people, what ends up happening, they spread the word for you. And you're asking for referrals as well. So you're building your network, referrals, you're adding value, you're practicing your coaching. And ideally, if you have a community, you're bringing back the data and sharing it. Hey, this is working, this is not working. So you're building that. There's so much that happens that it's like to me, it looks like a beautiful orchestra if you do it more and more and more. And then at some point you can create that for yourself, but in the beginning it will be clunky. And when you get to a point where you understand this, it's just a matter of just taking people through that journey. And if you talk to 10 people, maybe 8 won't sign up, but 2 will. Maybe as you get better, 4 more won't sign up, but 6 will sign up, or 7 will sign up. That's when you start to go towards mastery. That's when you start to understand how you can actually support people. And those you can support, you connect them with the right support that they need, or you continue to add value to them. They will be ready later on. Very simple process. And it might take you, on average, it takes me about close to 2 to 4 hours, actually 3 to 4 hours to get through that journey. And on average, anywhere from 2 weeks to 3 months to take clients through that journey. And when they go through it at the end, they're like, okay, I want to be part of that. Why? Because we built a relationship, we built trust, I added a lot of value. I helped them understand that this is a long-term relationship. And this is why I love that you brought Alex Hormozi, is that 2 key things that I've gotten from him is, one, that your product cannot be shitty. Work on your product, which in this case, your coaching skills, that's your product. That's why in Coaching Mastery Community, one of the things that the main thing we focus on is your skill sets. If your skill sets are shitty, I can give you all the leads you want. It will just not work. You're not delivering the right value. If you can work on that, your referrals will build your business. That's important. That's that. Your product is the main thing. Your mastery of your craft is one of the main things that you work on. And the other thing is the long-term view of things. That if you're doing this for 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, that's not going to work. But if you're looking at this 10 years out, that is a very different picture that you have. Now you're building skill sets, mastery. It might not work for the first 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, but after that, now you can accelerate that path and go at it from a very different angle. Most people don't look at it. Most people, by the end of the year, they'll be like, oh, let's jump into another opportunity because this one is not giving me the payoff fast enough. And they jump into the next one, or they start 3 other businesses, or they start other things that takes away from their focus, from dedication, from building their craft. But this whole process is the journey of mastery, the journey of adding value to the level where your clients ultimately decide what value you're deciding. So as a coach, you might be thinking, well, you know what? I don't know if I value my program so much. It doesn't actually matter, because ultimately your clients will decide, the market decides whether or not your product and your service is valuable. And the only way to know that is if you put yourself out. And that's the scariest part of this whole process, is put yourself out, have the conversations, be open to people saying no, and continue to keep adding value. That is it. Was that simple, or did I make it complicated?
No, I think it's pretty simple. And for me to be able to have seen Faisal and others have that longer term perspective, and for me not to fall into the trap of thinking, oh, my 5th webinar or whatever isn't getting traction that I want, that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm on the right path, but maybe I'm not on the right path. So the question is like, how do I actually evaluate it? How do I actually know? And that's where being in community with people that are doing things, that are trying things, and can have some actual meaningful feedback is so really important. And I loved you snuck this in there quick, but you said something about like a beautiful orchestra.
Yeah.
And so the imagery that came to mind when you said that was when we're beginner coach, it's like we're standing on the stage all by ourselves, the spotlight's on us, we have a microphone, but we really can't even sing on key yet. And our voice is warbly. So like, so it's like horrible, but we got to do it. And then as we go and we get experience, all of a sudden, we're able to sing on key. We're able to do these little trills. We can range octaves and we're getting more confidence. And then maybe we're not solo anymore. And we've got, people around us that are singing harmony. And then you get the orchestra. Like, as business builds, you then add these components. And it's okay that you are solo with the microphone and maybe not quite on tune yet. That is okay. That's part of the journey. There is no judgment. It's just part of the journey.
Yeah, it's and that's when I actually had this conversation with my grandfather-in-law last night, and we were actually talking about Alex Hormozi, which was really interesting. The thing, I have a crush on Alex Hormozi at this point.
Right?
I'm talking to my wife about it. She's like, "It looks like you have it sounds like you have
a little business crush."
Not on his wife, on him.
Yeah.
So it's a business crush, and the reason why when you really listen to him, when you read his material. And everything he does, he talks about he might not even say the words, but he talks about the mastery of the craft. It's like, if you care about that and you have a long-term view on that, nobody can compete with you. And what he adds to that is the enjoyment of that craft. If it's something that's enjoyable for you, you will do it. You will consistently do it. One of the reasons why this podcast has stuck to it is because we enjoy the conversation. I remember when I even presented this idea when Sheri came along, in this process, like, I enjoy these conversations anyway. Why can't we leverage this to do this podcast? And nobody might listen to this for the first 2 years. I'm okay with that because I love talking about these things. But, and same thing Alex Hormozi talked about, he's like, for the first 2 years, nobody knew. But on the 3rd and 5th year, his podcast picked up.
Yeah.
That's generally what happens. Now, how many people do you know will consistently work on something for that long? The only people who work on it who are genuinely in love with talking about it, thinking about it, caring about that craft, and really caring about the long-term value of that. If you don't have that, please move away from this business, start something simpler and easier.
Yeah.
Literally go buy a business with a loan and learn to run it like a restaurant, like a machine, like a laundromat. Those are much easier businesses to run than something like coaching. You're starting it from scratch and building your craft around it. That's the difference.
Absolutely. And also I would add to that enjoyment of the process, because that's something else that Alex Hormozi talks a lot about. Kind of also have a little business crush on him. Don't tell my husband, although I turned my husband on to him too. So, we're both kind of like listening to his podcast in the morning. But it's this perspective that and Alex thinks about business as a game. And he goes into game theory, which I'm so not an expert on, but I'm fascinated.
Love the game theory model.
Yeah. And so he talks about, game theory, there's games where the endpoint is the purpose. And then there's games where the game itself, not the endpoint, is the purpose. And so he looks at business as the purpose of business is business. It's the process. It's not the endpoint. It's not, and in real estate investing, which is a lot of where I live, in what I do and where I coach, a lot of people have investing as there's an endpoint. Like, how can I have enough passive income so I can quit my job? And they may not say anything else, but kind of the implication is quit my job and, sip martinis on the beach or something like that. Of course, once they get to that point, they realize that's not really satisfying, but their perspective is that the endpoint is the goal. But rather, if you enter into investing or coaching or whatever you're doing as actually the journey is kind of the goal. And for us as coaches, one of the things that I've discovered personally for me is is the challenges and the struggles that I have as a coach are actually what make me better at coaching. So if I embrace them, the frustration, the overwhelm, and I get overwhelmed a lot. Faisal knows this. Anybody that works with me, my husband knows this. And yet I'm finding, okay, well, how do I deal with this? How do I evaluate my overwhelm? How do I figure it out? Do I embrace it? Do I try to figure it out? Do I try not to be? Like, these are all questions going in my mind. And so then on the other side of that, I'm like, oh, wow, I can really help people through overwhelm much better because I am dealing with it. Like, this is the value of your journey as a coach. So rather than thinking like the end point is the goal, if you can embrace the journey of a coach, which is literally why we call this the Coach's Journey podcast, because this is so fundamental to how we view our journey and how we view life. You can do that. That also will help you sustain and have that longer term focus, because you're not going to get frustrated with the bumps in the road. You're going to know bumps in the road is just part of it. I'm still, I'm still headed in the right direction.
Yeah, I really love that, and again, it's a human journey. If you really look at it, is that a lot of times we have these end goals, and again, Hal Elrod is going to be on our podcast on July 11th, and we're going to be broadcasting that live as well. And one of the things that he talks about over and over, which I really connect with, is that the goal is not the purpose. The goal is just, it gives you direction, it gives you focus, but the purpose is your own growth, the game itself. And that the one is the game of life that we're all in, and we got jumped and we have no idea what the hell we're doing. But I think the wisdom that gets developed over time, at least that I've started to see in other people, and as I've started to get an inkling of it, is that, you know what, it's not the end goal that matters. It's the journey that I'm going through and how I'm growing into the being that I am, or I'm meant to be, or I was created to be, however you want to look at it. That journey of growth is more important than almost anything I could do. And being present to that, even though at times it can be very painful, being present to that is actually where the real wisdom is. And what you connected with is that the overwhelm that you're feeling, is that working through that is the thing that will help your clients. I'll bet, take two coaches. One coach is going through that right now, one is not. The one who's going through that right now is a much better position to support his or her clients than the one who has done it maybe 10 years ago. And if you're not going through overwhelm, you're not going through to the growth pains that come with this. If you're not afraid, if you're not nervous, probably not doing the right things. Or
you're not doing enough of it. Yeah.
Or you're not doing, and you even did a post the other day, I think, on the imposter syndrome. So if you're not feeling like the imposter, then you're probably not doing it, because you're stretching who you are. You're stretching the limits of your personality characteristic that is not static. It's going to grow with you. And so you feel like that those are important pieces of you growing as a human being. And I think the coach's journey is that it's that growth that you have. So for last time I was sitting with we were finally successful in setting up a bedtime routine for our kids. So so they're in bed by like, I think 8:30, 8:45, something like that. And we're sitting like, what do we do now? I had some ideas about that, but she had different ideas. So we're sitting down and we're talking, and we were sharing different things, but we were reflecting on the past few years. I was like, do you realize that in the past, just the past few months from the beginning of the year, we've already taken three vacations already? But here's the interesting part of it. When I was starting, I was like, you know what, if I get 2 vacations a year and I can make $50,000-$60,000, we'll be very happy. But we've gone way beyond that. But it wasn't the vacation. Now we're going on vacation. Guess what we're talking about? Guess what we're like? How can we expand our impact? Now we're discussing like, okay, end of the year, we're going to start a podcast together. Yeah, third podcast. But podcast together, us working together as the kids are growing up. And that was our original vision. But a lot of our time, even when we're thinking about vacation, we're much less interested on the time on the beach, more interested in the learning process of it. Like even our vacations are, how can we take kids to a natural area, to a museum? How can we go to a conference with them? Similar to what you do, Sheri, take them on like a volunteer thing. That becomes much more important, much more purposeful. But ultimately, everything connects to that sense of purpose. Like, why did we start this to begin with? And what's our long-term view here? And you start to realize that everything becomes about building yourself and your craft.
Yeah.
And if you are on that journey, you're on the right path. If you're trying to build a profitable business for the next 2 to 3 years, this is going to replace your income, and that's the only view you have around this, it's probably not the right business for you for a number of reasons. First of all, it's going to be too much work. You're not going to be able to sustain it. And second, the fact that you will not enjoy it and you will not be able to work through that stuff because you're not enjoying it and you don't have a long-term view, you don't have your purpose associated with it. It's just not worth it. Like I said, there are easier businesses to run. But if you're in on it from that long-term view and you enjoy the process, your purpose is connected to you, I can tell you can create a profitable business, you can create an impactful business that will actually help you feel like you're making a difference out in the world and your own life, but also you're growing as a human being. And that's the part that I love the most, is that I've consistently pushed the limits of my growth that I would not have in another context. And I'm pretty sure Sheri feels similar, but I'll let you speak.
I do feel similar. And I just kind of want to tie the conversation solidly, back in, with the context of sales, because our sales as a coach, like, is it allowing you to grow? And is your sales process actually a process that also helps your clients grow, even in the midst of the sales process? I mean, if your values are around growth and all of these things and a long-term perspective, is your sales process consistent with that? Is it congruent with that? Like, those are the questions that is important for you to think about, important for me to think about, important for Faisal to think about. And don't ever stop thinking about that, because as we're growing and shifting and trying new things, we're constantly flexing. And, there have been moments where I'm like, I realize, well, this thing that I was doing actually doesn't really feel like it fits. And then after, when I'm feeling this like a little thorn in the side, but I'm not really sure why. Sometimes it takes me a while to figure it out. I'm like, oh, okay, that's why. And so just be aware of that and just be cognizant of that and self-evaluate all the time. I can't emphasize that enough.
And also get a coach. Just get a coach, get a community. So don't get stuck in your head, because the one form of feedback and evaluation is, yes, reflect, step back, but a lot of times we don't see what the hell is happening in our life. I can't tell you how many struggling situations this year I've been in where I worked on it for a whole week and I'm working through it. I'm sitting there and for some reason I don't see the silver lining here, and I don't know how to work through it sometimes with all the work that I've done. And one of my first instincts is, okay, I need to bring this up to my coach. And when we get on the call, after about 45 minutes, I'm like, thank you for having this conversation. This just freed me up. And now I can move forward. Like, literally, I wouldn't need another call for the next 2-3 weeks. Now I'm in action mode because that freed me up. And that's exactly what we're promoting as coaches, that you need to get out of your head. You need outside perspective, especially perspective that will help you or pull out your wisdom and help you make sense of your path a little bit better. That is your path as well. So if you don't have a coach in this process, whether it's a business coach or a mindset coach, definitely get it. And that is an embedded part of our community that we work with our clients with. So our clients get coaches. They'll get a business coach at certain tiers. They will get a mindset coach at least in the main tier. We encourage you to get that support that you need. And as you're thinking about your sales process, have a long-term view. And I'm going to keep giving this challenge until somebody takes it and they use it. Have your first 100 calls. I know it sounds big. It's not that big. It's like 5 calls a week for the next few months. That's it. If you can get on 5 discovery consult calls, strategy calls a week and actually walk them through that simple process, make your offers, I will bet that you will have a consistent set of clients after those 100 calls or after 10, 15. And here's my offer to you. If you get through 10, 15 calls, you have no clients, reach out to me. I'll jump on a call and I'll assess what's happening. And I'll bet there's something off about your skill sets or craft that's not landing those clients. It has nothing to do with your clients. And there might be a market challenge too. But I can help you work through that. But most coaches are not doing that. You will hear coaches say, I'm building my business, I'm doing all this stuff. But when you really go into what they're doing, they're not getting on calls. They are busy with all sorts of stuff that has nothing to do with serving people. And this could be a group call or one-on-one call. You pick how your approach is. But I've been able to do it on both sides. But essentially, most coaches that we run into, they want to do one-on-one coaching starting out. Some will have a mix of the two. Some would want to start with groups first. But majority of the coaches I know is that they just want at least 8 to 10 clients consistently for themselves. If you really want that, take that challenge. Book calls, at least 5 calls a week for the next 90 days, and I'll bet you're going to have clients. If you don't, there's something wrong with your process. Something needs to get tweaked. That's where we're here to support you with. Is that too much of a challenge, or is that good, Sheri?
I think that's good. Good. A strong challenge is a good thing in coaching, right?
Yes, I fully believe that. And then if you have any thoughts around this, please share with us. What have you learned out in the industry? What kind of companies do you feel aligned with? Like Sheri started the conversation. When you have been in a sales call, what has felt aligned with you? Essentially, that's what you need to do with your clients. And what are the parts that didn't feel aligned with you? That's something that you should not be doing in your sales process. But we can help you with that. We can support you with that process. We have actually done masterclasses both on delivery and your sales process. So if you haven't watched that, let us know below. We'll give you access to that. Other than that, just share your thoughts, comments. And by the way, that's for people who are in our group. If you're not in our group, you should be able to find a link that will connect you to our Facebook group. If you're listening to this on podcast or YouTube, definitely connect with us. We deliver a tremendous amount of value in our Facebook group. And like I said, our own clients are saying like they're surprised how much value they're getting from our free group. So we're not even charging anything, but you're getting a lot of value. So join our community of coaches, and we'll be happy to support you and grow together as coaches.
And like and share this episode with a coach that you know. Because we don't advertise our podcast. We're not like, throwing we don't have ads all over the place. This is organically grown, and we don't, we want to make sure it gets in the hands of the coaches that need it and that are looking for it. So please do us that favor. And we and everybody else in the community would be super excited to get even more amazing coaches to be around.
Yes, and until our next conversation, hope you have an incredible week, and we'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye.
You're listening to the Coach's Journey Podcast.